Daredevil's been gone for a really long time.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about the premiere of Daredevil Born Again and the controversial opening to the show. Was it the best thing Marvel has ever done, or a huge character assassination? Now, this is a special video because we're going to be joined by two greats from the Nerd Hall of Fame, Mike Lawrence and Cameron Kasky, and later I'm going to tell you guys my problem with this premiere, but first I want to talk about what worked. But first, I am so excited to show you guys this new shirt at our merch store, the No Fear tribute to the hallway fight. We also have the Fist Can Fix It campaign shirt, the Rabbit in a Snowstorm, a replica of the Battle of New York newspaper cover, and we have our Nelson and Murdoch logo and the Law & Order parody tees. Links for all of those are below. And don't forget, you can now listen to ScreenCrush on Spotify, Apple, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Now, Daredevil is a personal character for me because I remember when I read my first Frank Miller comic. I was 11 years old on a field trip and I bought a trade paperback of the Gang War storyline from a gas station. I was amazed that a comic book could be like this. It changed my idea of what comics could be. And when season 1 debuted, I actually called off sick and watched it all in one day. I just love this redheaded loser so much. So I thought season 1 was the most loyal adaptation we've ever seen of a Marvel hero apart from Raimi's Spider-Man. It just felt like it was straight off the pages of those original Miller issues. And Vincent D'Onofrio took, frankly, a one-note villain like the Kingpin and gave him nuance and emotion. His version of the Kingpin that carries through seamlessly to Born Again is a broken child. Fisk has layers of humanity that make his unhuman actions even more tragic. And that is the kind of nuance that we just usually don't get from Marvel villains. He's nervous, he's petulant, and like Matt, he's always holding back his rage. And Charlie Cox embodies a man that can never be happy. He's always going to be tormented by the idea that he is never doing enough to win an unwinnable fight. Now, Daredevil as a character works because deep down, Matt wishes he was on those rooftops beating people up. He's always torn between being the sinner or the saint, and he hates himself for it.
Slap on top of that, he can take an unbelievable amount of punishment without one damn complaint.
Well, that's part's of Catholicism.
But he's convinced himself that he is also serving God's will. And in these first 2 episodes, they carried over almost everything that was great about the old show.
Yeah, except for Karen and Foggy.
Well, exactly, and I'm going to ask Mike and Cameron what they think about that a little later on. But for me, I didn't mind that they wanted to take the show in a different direction. I mean, the comics do this all the time. Characters move on. Matt moves to different cities. Writers shake things up by giving Matt different love interests. And the show is about Matt Murdock and not Foggy Nelson. And killing off Foggy is a game-changing event for Matt. Like Ned Stark's death on Game of Thrones, it leaves us wondering what the hell can happen next. Losing Foggy also takes the joy out of Matt's life. He loses his direction, he turns himself in, and he buries himself in guilt for allowing this to happen. So if the goal of storytelling is to challenge characters, losing Foggy robs the joy out of Matt's life. But it does make me worried that it's a trick the show will keep repeating, which I'm going to talk to Mike and Cam about later on. You know, guys, I have been so excited for this show to start. After all the delays, strikes, and rewrites, we are finally eating good. In fact, this year we are so busy with all the Marvel shows and movies and Andor in a few weeks that we are like non-stop every day. Now, it used to be that on days like that I would get irritated easy and I would crash in the middle of the day. But then I started drinking my AG1. They're the sponsor of this video. Guys, I love this drink. Even if they didn't sponsor us, I would still be a subscriber. In the mornings, it's the easiest thing I can do for myself to make sure that I'm going to have a healthier day.
Say there, person. I was just wondering, what is AG1?
Wow, you really teed that one up for me, huh?
I try.
AG1 is a daily dietary supplement, a research-backed daily health drink that combines a multivitamin, a probiotic, and a blend of superfoods into just one scoop. So we got a special deal for you guys. If you use my code or click the link or this QR code, you can subscribe and save $20 off your first subscription of AG1. Especially on those long work days, the B vitamins give me energy without the caffeine crash that I used to get from coffee. I get more done and I'm just in a healthier mood. And it is also very easy to use. We have 1 scoop inside 8 ounces of water. I like to add a little bit of the vitamin D3. Give it a shake. And it's just that easy. No messy blenders, just powder, water, shake, and you're on your way to a healthier day. So again, if you use my code, click this link or the QR code, you can subscribe and save $20 off your first purchase of AG1. I love having AG1 as a sponsor for this video because this drink has made a big difference in my daily life. Now, back to what I was saying. Now, for my money, Daredevil is the best Marvel TV show, and it's not even close. All of the other Disney Plus shows, you know, they feel more like a limited series, like they are a quick interlude between movies. But Daredevil is a TV show. show, with A and B plots and storylines that run parallel throughout the entire season until they finally culminate, like a television show. Even WandaVision and Loki, which are both great, are essentially limited series and not a true TV show. And this goes down to how Marvel used to plan and structure their television division. They planned their shows like movies. Instead of asking writers to submit pilot scripts and then hiring showrunners, they just decided they would make a show and then they hired people to make it. In other words, they ran their TV division like they were still making movies. But that has changed with Daredevil Born Again. This show is based in a traditional structure with showrunners and an open-ended format that would allow for multiple seasons. And unlike a lot of Disney Plus shows, this one feels like it's real. We are on the streets and not in a studio or in the volume or in front of a green screen. The bland, flat lighting we usually see is replaced with natural light or scenic lighting from street lamps. This adds to the idea that Daredevil always feels like he is in danger. The only moment that felt like detached from reality was when Matt runs across the rooftops, but that should feel larger than life. He is a superhero. Other than that, Daredevil always should feel like he is in peril, not because of his physical limitations, because he's an ordinary guy, but because he has been through so much in the comics. He's lost every woman he ever loved. He lost his law practice, his home, his license, and in these first 2 episodes, Marvel is reminding us that Matt Murdock cannot win, but he is an appealing character because, like his old man, he always gets back up and into the fight. And Kingpin becoming mayor is the kind of story that I wish Captain America Brave New World had told. What happens when a villain legally obtains power? I mean, in real life, villains almost always obtain power legally. Hell, Hitler was even elected chancellor.
So this is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
And this idea of Kingpin becoming mayor tests the line of legality. How can Matt fight the same system that he has sworn to uphold? But the most controversial part of this episode was the death of Foggy Nelson. And actually, we have a video coming up tomorrow about why his death actually saved the show. And man, I am so excited right now because I have an all-star lineup. We have Cameron Kasky, co-host of the FY Pod, and returning to the channel, we have Mike Lawrence, who is the co-host of the Nerd of Mouth podcast. You're 2 of my favorite, most knowledgeable comic book nerds. I can't believe I'm actually getting to introduce you guys to meet for the first time. You've heard what I thought about the show so far. Mike, what were your thoughts on the first 2 episodes?
I thought it was really good. I thought it was really well done, and I thought, I'm just gonna get it out of the way. Bullseye's costume was terrible. I have to say that it looked like ass.
Well, it's not his final costume.
Okay,
though.
well, either way.
The deleted, the behind-the-scenes stuff, I think he comes back later with the real
because
thing,
it looked like if they tried to modernize the Cookie Crisp burglar. Like, but I thought it was really well done. Daredevil stories are about Matt Murdock first. And less about Daredevil, and I think this is really focusing on that. The dichotomy of him and Wilson Fisk is really well done. This is, I feel like this has to be D'Onofrio's last time. He looks old. I think he's 65. And it was weird, like, there was a scene where someone was taller than him, and it's weird to watch anyone be taller than the Kingpin, but he's so good in the role and just, as an actor that you buy it. But yeah, I thought it was really well done. I thought they set up some really cool stuff. They're taking from many different runs. The Hector Ayala stuff is from Bendis. I think Charles Soule did the Muse stuff. Yeah, so it's really working for me. I think Charlie Cox was meant to play this character, and I'm glad that they got the band back together to do this.
Yeah, speaking of people getting older, as a man who's losing his hair, I'm noticing Charlie Cox is too, and I'm like, you know what? Fine, do an older Daredevil. He owns this part. Like, I'm rewatching Boardwalk right now, and to see him in that show play a completely different character is weird for me, because, man, like, from the moment they cast him, I was like, that's perfect. And in that first season, like I talked about earlier, I binged that in one day. And in my mind, I think in a lot of people's minds, he just always will be Daredevil. Cam, what were your thoughts on the first couple episodes?
I thought it was criminally good. And it was so funny because for years, Vincent D'Onofrio was tweeting over and over again, "We can get a Daredevil revival, guys. Hey, don't lose hope, fans. Daredevil might very well come back." And all of us were like, hey, Vincent, this is like kind of sad at this point. They're done with Daredevil. They're moving on.
I like how you're on a first-name basis with him. You're
we did
like
follow each other.
Like you ran into him at a party. Well, okay, all right.
But I was just
you guys
like,
are friends.
What if we just start calling him Vinny D?
Listen, Vinny D spent years just saying, like, "Oh, we can come back. Don't lose hope, everyone." And even Charlie Cox himself was
like... And then you said, yeah, but what do you want to order?
Yeah. Charlie Cox said, "No, Vincent, this is not going to happen. Like, drop it, move on with your life." And then not only does Daredevil come back, it's back and it's better than it's ever been. And you're like, wow, Vincent D'Onofrio, I got to hand it to you. You were right. Not only did Daredevil come back, it came back in top form. I mean, for me, the thing that this show did so well, the cast, they all just play those roles so effortlessly that it was hard to even notice how great the acting was because it felt so natural. But the pace and the way that they kind of fleshed out their world, it was all so great. I mean, in those first 2 episodes, they cover more story than your average 6-episode season of an MCU show.
And the episodes don't stop abruptly after 30 minutes, and the next episode's 40 minutes. An actual TV show.
And I was thoroughly entertained.
There's also that. It had that over shows like Secret Invasion, for example.
There's just so much happening, but it doesn't feel rushed either. They're happy to live in the moments and let the moments sit with you, and they're happy to give you that time with a character where there isn't necessarily some sort of pulse-pounding action happening, but you're getting a deeper understanding of that character and what they want. And it was just so weird because it's top-formed television, and it's better than, in my opinion, what I've seen from Daredevil before. And Daredevil before was pretty great. And I feel like the boy who cried, the MCU is making good stuff again now, because when I call my friends to tell them that, they'll be like, yeah, you called us after Guardians of the Galaxy 3, you know, you called it. But I'm saying to them, guys, this could be outside of the MCU. This could be anywhere. This is excellent TV. The pacing is great. The script is great. It's unafraid to be a comic book show, and yet it's not relying on the fact that it's a comic book. It's a compelling story with compelling characters anyway, but it's not running away from being a comic book. And one detail I'd highlight, just one thing I admired about the show, I'd say, and the way that it kind of fleshed out its New York, because the personality of New York in the show is just so great, was the way they used B.B. Urich's street interviews in between certain transitions, the way they would just cut to different New Yorkers talking about how they feel. I was like, that's such good writing. And it's a connection to the old Daredevil show that you don't even need to know about.
Oh, yeah, and that's one thing I always hated about the original show was the death of Ben Urich, because in the comics, I mean, Ben is a vital supporting character to Matt. I mean, Frank Miller would often, and Brian Michael Bendis did too, they hand him the narration. You know, he becomes the driving force, like the driving narrative behind a lot of issues. He's like the Commissioner Gordon for Bruce Wayne, but if Commissioner Gordon had actually been able to work out, you know, that Bruce Wayne was Batman's secret identity. Where did you guys land on the Foggy death? This is what I think, I'm curious to see a lot of fans already on social media and stuff talking about this. Mike, where did you land on that?
I mean, I thought it worked because, I think also what works about this show is that they keep it small. The MCU doesn't have to do everything. It doesn't have to connect everything. It just has to tell good stories with good performances, because that's what we want from everything. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that comic book, adaptations are immune to that. I think the best stuff that has worked, I mean, Iron Man worked because people love the RDJ performance, and people love the music and the humor of Guardians, right? So I think with the Foggy death, I thought it worked because Matt was responsible for it. You know, he was taken out by one of Matt's, villains, and it's all about Matt's reaction to that. And I thought that it worked. I thought that it never lost the, narrative of how that drove a wedge between him and Karen. And the show is a lot about grief, and I love the BB Urich stuff, because like when there is that tension when she is with Fisk and everything, and it's like, this is the dude who like killed her dad, and that
Uncle,
she's hoping to bring him down, but they don't put all the cards on the table. They don't make it so heavy-handed, which I like.
As somebody who went to journalism school, though, I was bothered because I was like, you haven't asked him a question yet. You're just going in and trying to get a reaction out of him. I was like, I know you're hunting for a soundbite, but come on, you got to ask him one question.
Hey, it's modern journalism. She's just going to do 20 Easter eggs that I noticed during the meeting with Wilson Fisk.
Yeah, or like the ending explained, or the mid-credit scene of my meeting with Wilson Fisk.
Yeah.
Mike. Anyways,
He mentioned bowling, and he is the kingpin.
oh, stop. Okay, so I do have one question about the Foggy death, right? So I'm worried, Cameron, that the Foggy death that we might be going, because I think this already happens to Daredevil in the comics. You know, like on the show Arrow, it seemed like every season was punctuated by a member of Oliver Queen's family getting killed to the point where it lost meaning. And in the original series, which is basically a prequel to this show, we lost Father Lantham. It seemed like every season, Ben Urich, we were always losing somebody to further his character development. And I don't want it to turn into a thing like in the comics where it's like, in the comics everybody comes back, but Karen Page hasn't yet. But like people keep dying that, Matt had a love interest or a friendship with just to further his arc. I believe you Green Lantern fans call this fridging. What are your thoughts on that and Foggy's death in general?
I think that the Foggy thing worked because it was in service of the story and the characters, and I think that it was consequences. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't always know what that word means. Like when you have a civil war and the closest thing you have to somebody really getting hurt is Rhodey falling down, and of course it split up the Avengers before Infinity War. But the MCU, there's not always very big consequences for the things that happen, and sometimes that makes it hard to watch certain things because you don't really have a sense of stakes. So like, it's season 12 of Stranger Things right now. None of the main characters ever die, and therefore when the main characters go down into the dark cellar, you don't really have this sense of, are they going to make it out? They're going to make it out because they're famous and because they need to be in the marketing materials for the next season. All this is to say, you need some sort of stakes and you need some sort of consequences, and you need to have this idea that just because somebody is a main character, that doesn't mean they're going to be okay. And at the end of the day, Foggy's death not only reminded Matt Murdock that there are consequences for his actions, and no good deed goes unpunished, they also put Matt in an emotional place that kicked off the season, and it contextualized what exactly was going on with him when suddenly Fisk is back and he's the mayor now, and for the first time in history, a corrupt, physically large crook is in charge of a government body.
I can't imagine that ever happening in real life. I do think there's a lot of Foggy, like a lot of Eldon Hansen fans who like ran into their rooms and tore down their Mighty Ducks posters after his death. But I agree with what you guys are saying about it. I just worry that I hope it's not a trick they keep repeating, because it's one of those things like Ned Stark's death, right? They did that was great, and then it was semi-repeated with the Red Wedding, but that was such a wipeout that I think it was an escalation. But if you keep doing that over and over, eventually, like with the CW, it stopped. For me, it also took away stakes because I knew somebody was always going to die. So I hope that's not where they go. But
I would say that there's a difference. On the CW, I think so many of the creative decisions being made can be directly attributed to what that season's budget was. So when a character got killed on a CW show for me, I was just thinking like, oh, okay, they didn't want to pay this person that year. And on Game of Thrones, it's a different story with Ned Stark and the Red Wedding, because Ned Stark is kind of a good guy following the rules in a world where following the rules gets you killed, right? And breaking the rules is what wins, even if it only wins on the short term. The Red Wedding was the consequences of Robb Stark's actions. Him betraying his oath to the Freys, which, by the way, Ned Stark would have never done. Him doing the opposite of what his father would have done ended up getting him killed. With Foggy, holy shit, Foggy's killed because Matt tried to do the right thing. Foggy had to pay the price for Matt's good deeds, and that changed Matt's relationship with Daredevil. And, the show had two options: either explain to us that Matt has been Daredevil for the past several years and has just been kind of hanging out and make us play this weird game of catch up, or let us meet Matt where he is, and just as we are picking up with him, he's picking up with Daredevil.
I think it made sense too. I think about The Dark Knight Rises and how it never made sense to me that at the start of that movie, Bruce Wayne has quit being Batman, when the events of The Dark Knight, I don't think left him in that position at all. So I take what you're saying there, that it gave us a believable reason that we haven't seen Daredevil pop up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe since then. So I'm with you on that. I just, again, hope it doesn't continue to be a point of escalation that the writers always fall back on. But you both talked about like kind of the MCU of it, right? And about other Marvel Disney Plus shows. There was something, how do you feel like this show, how do you see this show connecting, or does it need to connect, Mike? Or
No, I don't think it really does, I mean, look, they mentioned, Spider-Man very briefly, and, we've seen Daredevil, this Daredevil in No Way Home, so they're connected, but they don't really need to be, because it's also, it confuses things, right? Like, if you're watching this and the whole time, you're like, why aren't bigger people, why isn't somebody like a Nick Fury stepping in the way of a criminal like Wilson Fisk running New York, right? Like, when you start to think in those terms, it just ruins what they're showing you, because you're thinking about what's not there. And so I think minimizing things is better. Also, on the Foggy thing, in the comics, he does fake his death and go into witness protection. I don't think that's going to be the case here, but they may always do like he wasn't actually dead, but
Well, I mean, you're also talking about a universe where there's ninjas who raise people from the dead all the time. Like, if they really wanted to bring him back, they would find a way to do it.
But also, you could just let him be dead. You could do this crazy thing that people do sometimes in stories where someone dies and they're dead. And sometimes
even George R. R. Martin didn't do that, though. Even Lady Stoneheart came back. But I don't want to go down a Game of Thrones track, but I'm just pointing out that, like...
But yeah,
especially in the multiverse saga, and this is where I think this show really stands apart from that, because the multiverse is all about removing character stakes. It's like when they introduced the cheerleader blood and Heroes, all of a sudden nobody ever died for real, So I do hope he's dead. I hope he stays dead. But if they had a good story that brought him back, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if it was a good story.
Or he could just stay dead, because there's, sometimes if there's a show where there's deadly stakes and there's a character who isn't going anywhere and their presence in the story is not progressing the story, sometimes maybe it makes sense for them to die, right? Like, imagine if anybody on Stranger Things ever died.
You got an axe to grind today, man. You really wanted Max to go.
Okay, Max is one of the only characters I do
Billy
want
died.
to go.
I mean, they kill people, but they
every
kill people
character they
in the
kill
same season.
Exactly. Every character
Bob,
they kill,
Eddie, etc.
They all had a big red X on their chest the second you met them. But all this is to say, Foggy dying is great, and it was kind of a message from the MCU to us that's like, hey, we're not up to our usual shtick right now. We're letting material be itself. It was an extremely Daredevil thing to do, to kill Foggy right up there. You get your meet the family scene. You remember why we loved these three characters together. You get a little rapport between them. You get to watch Matt listening to Foggy try to flirt and kind of make fun of him a little bit with Deborah Ann Wool's Karen Page. You're like, oh, gee, that's why I loved spending time with those three. Oh, shit. Matt being Daredevil just everything up. And it made perfect sense, and I was very happy with it.
I personally, one of my favorite things about this show, Mike, you mentioned it earlier, and I want to circle back, is the fact that they've always treated the Kingpin, even when seasons he wasn't in very much, like season 2, as a co-protagonist. And they've really, I think, dived into a couple aspects of him that the comics don't traditionally explore as much, and that is that he and Matt are, in their own way, mirror opposites. Because in the comics, Kingpin is more about his own control, his own lust for power and control. In the show, they kind of reframed it to be, I want to fix the city and all this other kind of stuff, right? By gentrification. But he has that goal, and they did that to parallel him with Matt. In these first 2 episodes, you see a lot of shots that are the inverse of what we've seen before. You see Kingpin on the roof and Matt in the gutter. Matt looks like he's in hell with the red and the mist and all this stuff coming from the steam vents. You also had Kingpin from the very first season of the original show. Vincent D'Onofrio plays him so fragile. And, Mike, you mentioned Kingpin being shorter. They cast Michael Clark Duncan specifically so they would have an enormous Kingpin. They wanted him to feel like a confident, unstoppable force. How do you feel about this, Vincent D'Onofrio kind of peeling back those layers and showing his humanity?
It took me a long time to accept it. because especially in the first season when he loses a physical fight to Daredevil, it's like, well, yeah, he's not that big. He's just, and he like, he acts like Boss Baby, like he's just a giant baby at times. I'm really mad that someone hasn't changed my diaper, Vanessa. But it's grown on me because he is that good of an actor. It's and also the voice does have a little bit of that sugar water Men in Black, like you're waiting for a cockroach to just jump out of him.
That's true.
But I think what they've really done well, and I think it's a story in this season, especially where their parallel is the women that they pushed away. Like I think you look at like the story of Daredevil and Karen being more separate, and Fisk's story is more about he took like this amazing art dealer and everything, and he corrupted her, and I think he feels guilt about that. Of now Vanessa is a crime boss herself, and I think
pretty good at it too.
Oh yeah, and I think that
like in the comics,
I don't think he's ever questioned his choices as much as that he took someone outside of his world and corrupted them.
Those two actors are just so great. I mean, the therapy scene was there was this pause, this silence where you were so uncomfortable. And for a second, I genuinely thought that my screen had paused, and I was like, "Oh, I need to go." And then it was like, "No, these actors are just waiting to say what they're going to say." And you really felt it right there. I think the thing about D'Onofrio's performance that's so exciting to me is, like, yes, he's not the physical giant that Kingpin needs to be. I don't care. I don't need Kingpin to be physically large as much as I need him to be formidable and spiritually large. I need Kingpin to be a force more than I need him to be.
I think it helps with fight
6'7".
scenes, though.
Yeah, but I don't care about
Sure.
Kingpin's physical fight scenes. I care about Kingpin, who's going to be the mayor and a crime boss. Like, this isn't the Hulk. So I'm not obsessed with Kingpin necessarily looking like he jumped off the comic book page. I need him to feel like he did. I need him to feel like he is formidable like that. And the thing that D'Onofrio does that's so interesting to me is when I'm watching it, I feel like I'm seeing deep into him. I feel like I'm seeing past all the layers, and yet it still feels like there's so much smoke and mirrors. I feel like I'm being let in on personal truths that Wilson Fisk has that maybe he doesn't even completely know yet, and yet I feel like there's so much that both the audience and Fisk don't know about Fisk, and there's this juxtaposition between certainty and uncertainty where you hear this insecurity in his words, and yet the way he's delivering them simultaneously sounds so sure and so powerful and so strong. And it really is just like an interesting, topical and deep performance of someone who has a lot of power and does not necessarily use it for what's best. So D'Onofrio's performance to me is a highlight.
Mike, you mentioned he's Boss Baby, but somewhere on Twitter, we talked about this in our Easter egg video, somebody did ask him, describe Kingpin in 2 words, and he said monster and child. And I think he never loses that. Even in Echo, which is a show, they cut to ribbons and stuff, but the performances he's in for me, I mean, I talked about this earlier, and I want to get both of your thoughts on this, but for me, if you look at the whole breadth of MCU villains, I don't want to get into like Spider-Man and X-Men and stuff, I think he's my top villain, like, because he's so human, because his humanity makes his inhumanity so much more tragic. Where would you guys rank him, or who would you rank above this character?
No, just in this universe, I thought Kilgrave was better and more threatening.
Boy, Kilgrave was amazing.
And scary. In this Netflix universe, I like Cottonmouth a lot. But, I mean, I do like Kingpin a lot. It's just, I am one of those, like, hardcore fans, and not just Bendis' hardcore arc with Alex Believe, issues 46 through 50. But no, I like that.
Bob Gale had an underrated arc right before that too. Just as long as we're, name dropping here. But true.
Yeah, but I like that. The only way that Matt could physically beat him is if he pushed himself all the way, and now it's like You know, it's a 65-year-old guy, and yeah, he's wearing a fat suit. It's like I never believe that he can't just punch this guy out with one fist.
But who cares, man? Who
care.
cares? This is someone who's running for mayor in an examination of power and of structures of power. I don't want to watch the story where Daredevil figures out how to punch Wilson Fisk hard enough to beat him. I want to watch the story where Daredevil figures out how to outsmart him and defeat him not only practically but morally. I want to watch Daredevil learn how to stay true to his values and still outmaneuver Fisk. Like, if I want to watch somebody outpunch somebody, I can put on the UFC.
Yeah, but can't he do that and be physically impressive?
Yeah, for me, it goes back to Unbreakable. You know, there's that line, there's the hero that fights with the fist and the power that fights with their mind. I think in the comics, yeah, Kingpin can whip your ass, but he also, I mean, he does kung fu and stuff and beats.
He's a 500-pound guy that it's all muscle.
That is mostly muscle. Yeah, you're right. And very hard to pull that off without CGI, though, and I'm glad, personally, I'm with Cam. Like, I'd rather see Bullseye be the enforcer.
Unless we want to get that guy who played the Mountain on Game of Thrones to be Kingpin, but it's like, you know, I think that it's a matter of who can give us the most compelling performance, right? Like, Kingpin, I mean, man, remember in season 1 when they were cutting back to Wilson Fisk as a child when he accidentally, I was like, oh man, what D'Onofrio said was exactly right. This is a monster and a child. It's like Cameron Britton as Ed Kemper on Mindhunter. There's something so dark and so childish about it, and you know, never would there ever be a real politician in power whose childish tendencies are something that's dangerous and threatening. But hypothetically, if that were the case, this evokes that. And it makes you think, oh my God, the scariest part of Kingpin isn't the fact that he can crack my skull on the table right now. It's the fact that at the end of the day, that little kid inside Wilson Fisk, the guilt he has from being a child, that's what's calling the shots. The big Kingpin on the outside is just the vessel.
But he was like a really fat kid that was picked on for being fat. And let me just say the last thing. One of the greatest things in Kingpin comics that I've never seen on screen that I would like to just see once, which I believe they did on cartoons a couple times, but they've never done it in live action. Shirtless Kingpin just beating up a bunch of dudes. It happens all the time in the comics. It's happened since Spider-Man in the 60s when Romita drew it. Frank Miller did this scene a lot. I love it. It's just the best when a bunch of dudes are like, oh, I could take on that blubbery fat guy, and then they're like, oh man, it ain't worth the money. I quit.
That sounds
You're
hot.
right. That seems
even
been repeated.
I like comic books to be serious and grounded, but I also like them to be silly and fun. I mean, I know that this isn't that, and I have Spider-Verse, and I have, you know, the video game to a lesser extent, although he's not that big in that either. But, you know, and also as a fat guy, representation matters.
All right, Mike, you're going to get Cam too excited here, so I'm going to call it there. Again, we got Cam from FY Pop, Mike from Nerd of Mouth. Mike's great. I mean, just follow him on everything. Cam's okay too. Follow him on stuff. Let me tell you guys why I think this show needed that little bit more of a tie into the MCU. That would have been a light lift, but would have made the show a lot better. Thanks, guys. So, when the first season of Daredevil premiered, I was so excited to see how they would connect it to the movies. My dream scene would have shown Daredevil in a gutter beating the crap out of some guy, while Iron Man flies by overhead completely oblivious. But over the years, the interconnected nature of the MCU has become more of a hindrance for its creatives. Shows and movies spend too much time seeding new projects and characters that end up distracting from the stories of the main characters.
Oh, and when are we getting the X-Men?
I cannot tell you that.
I thought this was true of Riri Williams in Ironheart. She didn't need to be in the movie, and ultimately we could have spent more time with Shuri, Ramona, or Namor. And also, the sheer volume of new shows and movies means that they can't really interconnect them like they used to. Like in the Infinity Saga, it was easy. There was a narrative straight line from Winter Soldier through Avengers Endgame. And then, shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. could use the Avengers movies as tentpoles to build around. For instance, we saw the lead up and aftermath of the Winter Soldier, and we even saw how Fury got the helicarrier that we saw in Age of Ultron. But now, the MCU just has one of these culmination events, Doomsday and Secret Wars. So this means that they have not planned out the ground level storyline with the kind of narrative efficiency that we saw in the Infinity Saga. Like for instance, the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. led to the heroes being unpoliced and making mistakes, which caused Civil War and the breakup of the Avengers. But now, events are just happening randomly. Secret Invasion, the Marvels, Brave New World, all of these huge global stories just don't feel interconnected at all. So, I do wish all of this was a little bit bit better planned out. A Daredevil show that led into a street-level Spider-Man movie involving the Kingpin and the Venom suit, where maybe we see President Ross praising leaders like Fisk for clamping down on vigilantes. This could have led to a story where Ross and other world governments put political pressure on New Asgard and Wakanda, and maybe this could have all culminated in some kind of a world war, which would make the heroes wonder if their universe was even the one worth saving. But within this show, I just wish they would have specified where the hole came from. It could have been from a superhero battle or like a renegade damage control drone. That kind of subtle world building is just the little tiny push that I would like to see the show apply to make it connect to the larger universe without sacrificing the story they're telling. Well guys, that's just what I thought of the first 2 episodes. Let me know what you think on our free to join Discord server or down in the comments below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.